including intangible items such as brand premiums, when calculating it as design, despite representing in the statements that such items were not included. What the fuck, man? I'm serious.
Hey,
Hey everybody, welcome to the 5-8. There's always new things in Chunk's intro, and I never know when exactly it's going to end. So I'm sitting here with my drink, waiting for it to end, and then the second that I put it down, it ends, and that's how it goes. How are you, LB?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good now. I'm excited for the show. This is going to be a good
I know
one.
it's going to be a good show. I feel like we were just together. That week went really fast.
It did. It did go fast.
What are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking a Manhattan as per usual. What are you having?
I'm having my favorite new drink, diet tonic water and Rose's lime juice. That's it.
Okay.
So good.
Again, putting vodka in there would also work.
I understand that, but I'm not doing that.
I'm just going to make the same joke until people laugh, and no one can laugh because, there's no live audience, which is a thing.
Well,
we have to say up front. Please, everybody watching, subscribe to the show. I have to pretend I'm like the 8-year-olds know how to do this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, man, because that helps us. And we should also talk about, for anybody that has not watched the show before, it is called the 5-8 because it starts at 5 or 8, depending on what coast of the United States you live on. And it is our format, 5 topics, 8 minutes each. And I think we should get right. We have a very good. I'm very excited about the guests. I'm very excited about the karaoke tonight. I think we should just dive right in. Okay.
All good things happening tonight. All right, go ahead.
Okay, mobilize this is the first thing. This is the whole Putin thing. Now, last week the Russians got their ass kicked in Ukraine. The counteroffensive is something that's going to be studied like in military manuals and intelligence manuals, helping the military for generations after this. It helps that the Russian generals are so bad, and the Ukrainians are literally fighting for their survival while the Russians don't even want to be there. But they got trounced, and they're losing. Everybody is starting to pick up on this, even within Russia, even within the very controlled media environment there. People are starting to turn on Putin, and now he's called for a grand mobilization. First it was 300,000. Now there's reports of he wants a mobilization of 1 million men, which is sort of like when they want a million MAGA march. Like they're not going to get 1 million.
Oh, wow.
I don't think. But these guys, they're just guys that are either very young, or they're in college and they have no military training at all, or they're very old, and they're not going to now suddenly get trained really quickly, go into Ukraine and win. And I made this joke this morning on the podcast, but it's like back in middle school, you'd be like, I'm going to kick your ass. And you'd say, oh yeah, you and what army? But literally, Putin, you and what army? Because you do not have an army. In order to invade another country illegally against international law, you generally need an army to be able to do that. And his army is being routed. And, and it's sad. It's a tragedy. Like this one guy has caused all of this chaos and atrocities and horror. And, he just keeps throwing fuel onto the fire. He just keeps making it worse and doubling down. And the only way it's going to end is when he steps down, whether he steps down voluntarily or he steps down out of a 10th floor window, as happens there. That's what literally everyone on planet Earth is waiting for. This it's just a very bizarre situation. It's very sad, and it's not going to end in any good way for Putin or for Russia. He's going to go down in history as the guy that authored this humiliating defeat, like where it makes Nicholas II look like a military genius kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and even more so, the war crimes that we're going to be hearing about for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's just horrific. I don't know. You and I were talking about the wisdom of allowing one another to maintain these arsenals of nuclear warheads, and having that be the threat to say, well, I'll go ahead and invade and commit war crimes. It's not just skirmishes or maybe territorial stuff. This is even close to what happened in Crimea, right? Which was horrible. And you can't do anything about it the rest of the world because, or at least NATO, right? Which Ukraine's bordering up against, because I have these nuclear weapons and I'll just threaten to use them. I just feel like we've got to get, I know how everybody feels about did I put someone on a list of saying, okay, maybe under these circumstances and these conditions, we would look at possibly taking one person out to not have this happen in the world. I know that's such a tricky area. I'm sorry, everybody, to bring it up, and I get it. I get all the ins and outs of it. It's just this guy. And
well,
I don't think that's propaganda. I don't think that's fake reporting. It really is him. And if he wasn't in there, this wouldn't be happening.
I think that this what we've been doing to Russia from a diplomatic sense, from an economic sense. Yeah. I've talked about this before. Very early on, Biden rallied the troops. Trump spent 4 years trying to break NATO apart. NATO, which has been responsible for peace in most of Europe since 1945. Trump just goes in there and tries to destroy it. And again, we are very, very lucky to be alive at this moment in history and not have and to live through the many, many horrible wars that happened in Europe for the 2,000 years before that, right?
Fratricide.
Trump doesn't care. He's just trying to destroy this. Biden puts this together, and the sanctions this time on Russia are crippling. And they're designed to make it so that everybody in that country goes, wait a minute, this is not cool. What's going on here? Why are we so powerful? Why are we not winning? Why are we being treated this way? Why are we pariahs? We can't go anywhere. Now the planes, you can't leave. All of this stuff is designed ultimately, I think, in my opinion, to ratchet up the pressure internally on Russia to turn on this guy. So he will have to leave, and to go where? There's nowhere for him to go. He cannot go to a different country other than
we
maybe
need
North
to
Korea.
Shoot all these. Let's just shoot them out into space. I mean, let's get some data, at least. Put them on a Bezos space penis, and off they go. I'm in. Let's see what happens. We can put all kinds of things on him, get his vitals, see how let's make it worth it.
I mean, the other thing about Putin in that he has in common with the people that you mentioned, these guys, these very rich guys that are trying to go into space, is that he has more money than all of them.
That's right.
It's ill-gotten, it's stolen, it's laundered and hidden in various places that I'm sure people know where it is. And that money needs to be seized. It needs to be taken, and it needs to be paid. It needs to be sent to Ukraine and to the people of Russia, whatever's left over from what he stole. So that's how this has to end, with Putin going down and his stuff getting taken back from the people that he stole it from. And it
would be very nice. Well, let's see what happens.
Yeah. But it does feel like there's a lot going on in that part of the world right now. And just because we had a good week in Ukraine last week doesn't mean that next week's going to be good, because
that's true. Wars
tend to have this pendulum effect. And, Putin is now desperate and will, as Hitler did. I wrote a piece months ago comparing Putin's rise to Hitler's rise. And there are many, many parallels, even before the hostilities began and he started invading sovereign nations. Hitler again could have ended the war and chose to, no, we have to find the kids and the old people and one last hurrah for the the motherland. And it looks like that's where Putin is headed. And the hope is that this crop of people is going to not stand for it. I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll have to see. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Let's celebrate the good week. How about that?
Yeah,
I like that.
So. I like that too.
I like that too. Okay. We're done 30 seconds early. Let's move on.
We're getting used to this time thing. Okay.
I know. It's good. We're doing well.
Okay. This one is just 1 for you, 19 for me. What does that mean?
Oh, 1 for you, 19 for me. Well, that's a line from The Tax Man.
Yeah.
The great Beatles song, right? Right before I'm the tax man, right? So I wanted to talk about, I did this you know, all of the stuff going through QAnon and all this propaganda and Flynn and all these, these just horrible chaos agents, and all their nonsense. It's so often just tied really closely to where you can't even ignore seeing it, to what's happening in Donald's inner struggle. It just is. So I remember, if everyone can think back, and I don't have the dates here in front of me, guys. I was trying to find what I did right before the show. But it was like 4 to 6 weeks ago, or maybe a little longer, where all of a sudden there was this thing happening in the discourse where it's, oh, Biden's hiring all these IRS agents and they're going to come and take your guns. And, all the crazies from the magazines were all up and like, these poor IRS agents, it's like, well, yeah. But that was right at the time, not right at the time that Eric Trump was pleading the fifth, 500 times in the Tish James investigation. The other kids were in there. Donald, I don't believe, had been summoned to his deposition yet. He was the last one, but they had Weisselberg, they had all this stuff. And it had to have been clear to any attorney worth their salt. And there were some good attorneys in there for those kids, right? I don't know about Donald. I think he has good attorneys on this case, who could tell, okay, this is just a civil case, but she can criminally refer you to the IRS, and that will destroy you. So I just can't imagine that anyone in those, hearing all those questions where they had to keep pleading the fifth and knew where the direction of the investigation, where it had been, what she had, where it was going, what kind of stakes were actually on this guy's head, how bad of a situation is it? I believe in those, that became very clear to the attorneys and everyone else, as if they didn't know beforehand that. Then we get this thing about the IRS agents. And now we find out, right, from Tish James that yes, this was a whole crime family running a criminal racket, and she is criminally referring them to the Justice Department and the IRS. You don't want the IRS after you. Now listen, I know everybody.
Uh-oh.
My signal.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you froze or I froze. Sometimes you froze. Okay, this is it. The IRS is after you. Okay.
The IRS is after you. You don't want that. People have been trying. You see people in the, in the news shows trotting out the Al Capone example, and everyone who's followed me knows that this is my wheelhouse, right? So, it's kind of important to remember, I think, for the Treasury, for the IRS and the Treasury, and in these investigations and things they might be looking at, that whole unit really took off under Elmer Irey. This is, back in the 30s, right? The 20s and 30s. And that division of like looking at investigating and tackling this kind of crime back then, this wasn't, a murder or a burglary, or it was a different kind of crime to think about these financial crimes. And how would you even investigate that? How would you set up an investigative unit to do that? So the man who was in charge of all that, so there's a very famous quote. Someone working in his office said, go to the Postal Service, because those guys don't let a penny go missing, right? They can find a penny in a sand dune, right? They're just like, you want the Postal Service guys. So that's where Elmer Irey came out of. He was head of the Postal Service detective, and he then became head of the Treasury for this investigative unit. One of the first hires, he was working with the Coast Guard, and one of the first hires he brought on and knew to bring on was Elizabeth Friedman, who I've written a lot about. So, and Elizabeth was coming out of this code breaking. She created cryptanalysis with her husband. The unit that she put together to actually go after the rum runners on behalf of the Treasury, because they had radio, they were picking up all these signals. She had to decrypt all this stuff. And she's like, okay, for me to really run this investigation, I'm going to need secret touch points across everything from Secret Service to the other law enforcement agencies. I can't remember. There were 6 of them. And that string of putting all that together, those little agencies, her little unit that she formed with tapping on those 6 different agencies so they could decrypt all the stuff from the bootleggers and actually see the criminal operation that was Al Capone's sort of empire that he was connected into with Arnold Rothstein. That that allowed her to do that because of all those things. That unit went on to become the largest intelligence agency in the world. I think that's that she founded, helped co-found the NSA. So that's the history of the NSA and all of that. Bringing it back down to, she's the one who actually caught Al Capone. She did it with Elmer Irie, right? They did it through finding the LLCs. She worked with her husband a little bit on that and connected, tried to find that network. You have to understand and see how the business operates to understand how people are hiding their money. Why was this such an issue with the tax man and that investigation, right? Was it so critical? Everyone throws it off. It's like, it doesn't matter if we get Al Capone on murder, we can get him on taxes. Well, they actually were getting him on murder, so to speak, because this is the thing with white collar crime. It's when it's connected to organized crime, it's just the profiteering off of human misery. And so understanding his network, how he had his money, what the LLCs were, that all these different corporations and shell bodies that he had, how the flow of goods was coming in and being distributed by this broader syndicate that Capone was working with. That's how they were actually able to figure out how this money was made. If Capone could have just said, hey, it's fine, I make my money illegally, and there were no consequences of that, he'd fill out his tax forms. He can't do that. So that's the other thing I keep reminding people is like, remember that that's in the back of this story as well. Donald couldn't say how he was making money, how much money he was making, where it was coming from, where's he getting his phones, what's this brand premium licensing fee, who's paying for that, who's on these golf courses. This is not a morass that he could explain to the taxman. It wasn't just, I'm not going to pay taxes, I'm going to keep money, I'm going to cheat. It's, I don't want you knowing how I do what I do in my business. Maybe he didn't even know the scope of how he did what he did in his business. That's why he had Fred's boy Weisselberg running the shit for him. But that's the point of all of that. So if you're Donald Trump and you're sitting there and you're pleading the fifth 300, 400 times because Tish James is grilling you, and it's clear to you and it's clear to your attorneys and it's been clear for a while, she's going to make a criminal referral to the IRS, you are fucked.
I can't say anything after that. You know, I was going to say Adam Davidson had a good thread today or the day before about looking at he's the journalist at the New Yorker who wrote the big story about all the shenanigans financially in Baku and Azerbaijan. Right. And you read it and you're like, oh, this is going to be the thing that takes him down. And
we can launder money.
But there was a lot of this weird stuff with money and golf courses in this guy. There always has been. And the sooner that we pay attention to it, the better. In Scotland, I think there's lots of weird stuff happening. I don't know. It's what I'm hearing. People are saying this. It's what I'm hearing, you know?
Yeah, people are saying. Okay. And we're just asking questions.
We are. We're just asking questions. I don't know. Questions. You know, I as far as I understand it, this is how it is. Okay. We're running a tight ship today. I'm proud of us. Yeah. Okay. It's time for this week's karaoke. So I should give a quick preamble, right? Before we play.
After.
No? After? Okay. All right.
Too good.
Okay. No preamble. Here we go.
Do you hear the zombies rage, spewing the lies of QAnon? JFK Jr. is alive. They say it's clear their brains are gone. They broke through the barricades, heeding the call of Donald Trump. Then they all ran to the Capitol and they took a dump. They hate women and minorities and immigrants and gays. On their lawns are Let's Go Brandon flags and MAGA CAG displays. The insurrection gave them erections for days. Do you hear the zombies rage, listening still to Alex Jones? Even when agents from the FBI showed up and seized their phones, they lie felons like Mike Flynn and frauds like Mike Lindell. And today I'd like to say they can go to Mar-a-Lago.
Okay.
So I wrote the words to that because I was listening to Les Mis last week because I felt like crying. So I was listening, and I'm like, Les Mis could never happen now. Where's the Javert? There's no Javert. Anyway, and I'm listening to this, and I was like, I'm going to write this thing, and I wrote it and I recorded it, and I'm like, I sound like shit. Everyone's tired of hearing me singing. My friend and my wife's best friend, Marsh Hanson, was in Les Mis. He played Marius on Broadway. Like, he actually did. And I'm like, hey, maybe I'll get him to sing this song.
Yeah.
So that's Marsh Hanson. And
thank you, Marsh.
Not me. Okay.
He just took that from you and was like, oh, yeah, I'll do this. Dun, dun, dun. Sat down the piano.
And he sent me back the file and he called it Lame Is, like Lameis, which I think is an inside cast joke from.
It feels like it. Yeah.
Way back when.
Yeah. After the 100th show, you're ready to.
Yeah, after the 100th show. We're like, we're pretty good. We're right on time for our guest, who I'm very excited about. He is the author of Compromised: Counterintelligence and the Threat of Donald J. Trump. He's the former Deputy Assistant Director at the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, and he opened the FBI counterintelligence investigation into the Russian ties to Donald Trump. Pete Strzok, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
Thanks for joining us today. Yeah. I'm happy that you're here because I was afraid for a minute that you weren't going to show because I know Kash Patel and what's his name, Charlie Kirk. They were going to.
Yeah, they're looking for these constitutional sheriffs to bring charges against me in Texas or Nebraska or somewhere, Tennessee, wherever.
This is real. Explain this a little bit.
I'm not at all concerned about it. Apparently, they have this theory that they can find sympathetic sheriffs to the cause of bringing down the deep state to go and file some sort of whatever local relevant investigations and or charges that they might try and file somewhere in the mid-America that would target all of us. And I don't think there's any real legal weight behind it. I think it's entirely a part of a fundraising grift opportunity, but we'll see. While I'm not at all worried about my sort of exposure to any sort of such nonsense, I am worried. There was a big New York Times piece, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe-ish, talking about this constitutional sheriff movement and what that means and what that looks like. And in particular, there's some folks that, certainly in Wisconsin, there was a sheriff, I think in the southeast corner, one of the southeast counties in Wisconsin, who was going out and investigating some of the folks involved with the 2020 election and had actually tried to get one of the DAs or one of the local prosecutors to bring charges. And they said, no, absolutely not. But when you look at, I didn't know a great deal about sheriffs, but like every county in America has sheriffs. I don't think Alaska and Connecticut have sheriffs, but pretty much everybody else do. And they're all elected positions. So the idea that sheriffs with guns and badges and the sort of power of the law behind them are getting involved in very potentially partisan election related things going into the midterms is a real concern. So I'm not worried about Kash and Charlie or Jack or whoever. I get them all confused. I mean, that there's a Nick Fuentes, whatever. They're all kind of the same, but I don't. It's anyway.
If he writes a children's book about it, maybe he can present that as evidence.
There's another one apparently coming out. I think this one based on Dinesh D'Souza's, whatever it is, 50 Meals 2000, whatever the silly movie that nobody's seen except for what they play at CPAC when they have a captive audience. Yeah. So I hear. People
are saying. People are saying
that. People are saying it's a piece of shit. But what do I know?
I don't know, Pete. It's got to be also that this is sort of a strange space, I imagine, for you to occupy, because I do feel like something singular happened to you, which not a lot of people can say in life, right? So it's like, how are you, by the way? I think maybe let's start there. How are you, Pete Strzok? How you doing? Really?
I'm good. The weird thing was, I for a moment held out hope that with the 2020 election, if Trump was not reelected, that my sort of fake notoriety, fake fame, because of being this object of, the MAGA nation's ire would go away. and sadly, witnessed this thing with, they're trying to find sheriffs to go arrest me. In some corners, become this sort of like nebulous deep state monster that lives under the bed, that when MAGA Nation wants to scare their children at night and they tell a story, there's, Pete Strzok and the rest of the deep state that, will come out and get you if you don't, say your prayers and eat your fucking vegetables. So it's a weird to have this disembodied image that has nothing to do with me out there in a segment of the population, which is not unsubstantial, is a bizarre thing. Yeah. And it's, again, it's gotten, for a while was sometimes overwhelming, but it's gotten better, and sort of a measure of anonymity is returned, which is great. But I'm good. It's a weird place to be. I never would have predicted it. It is hard to explain. It is a very weird place to be an involuntary public figure in a way, because typically people who are either on the political side and have like a party apparatus to support and defend them, or they're famous because they're, an actor, an athlete, something where you've got a bunch of money and resources where you can go, live in a gated community and go to private places. Right. And so without that, it's a very strange place to be. And it's hard to explain, but it is what it is.
All right, but you're good otherwise.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Life is
I do enjoy. We enjoy your Twitter feed.
Very much.
Like you're getting your some measure of your emotional things out that way, and I'm there for it. It's good.
Yeah,
it's very good.
I think everybody here, if they're not following, should follow. It's really It is, and the thinking is nice too. So we want to think a little bit with you. Is that okay?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Greg,
can I ask my dumb question?
Ask the dumb question.
Okay, this is I to prepare for this. I wrote a piece about George Papadopoulos taking out of the volume 5. Okay, and
I said you have to call him Papadoppa Ding Dong.
Right, I had to revisit it.
He's already laughing.
It's so baffling, but he's the guy that started the whole thing basically. Mm-hmm. But he went from I'm going to read it so I don't screw this up. He went from like the interval between the time that he joined the U.S. advisor group for this presidential candidate and the time when he was wooed by a Russian spy was like shorter than the length of an episode of The Americans. Like is it the shortest interval ever? Is it a Guinness Book of World Records? Like what? It just seems preposterous.
Is there a medal?
Yeah.
In all your experience, have you seen anything happen faster than that?
No, but I mean, look, this is part of like every single administration. That's what that's what everybody does. Whether you're a foreign nation with an intelligence service, whether you're a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., the minute somebody's announced and you've got a candidate on the Democratic side, a candidate on the Republican side, everybody and their brother and sister are going out trying to figure out what are our avenues of influence into this group, who is one of the two is going to be the president. And who do we know? Who can we develop? And whether, again, you're, some grain lobbyist, or whether you're the SVR, or whether you're the MSS and the foreign intelligence services of Russia or China, everybody is trying to figure out, who do we know? And the weird thing about Trump was nobody knew any of these people. People understand, the Republican establishment had lined up behind people like Cruz or Kasich or Rubio, but nobody wanted to line up behind Trump. So when then he suddenly, stunningly gets the Republican nomination, everybody, including the Russians, including the Chinese, are scrambling to figure out, like, who the hell are these people and who can we influence? And then you stumble into George Papadopoulos, who's, had the model UN on his resume still when he was, kind of rolling into the administration.
I didn't know that.
As an aimed foreign policy. But so I hear, so I've heard, I'm not, that's what people say.
Oh, how
there
great.
are model UN stories from Georgetown. Okay,
surprisingly enough, they aren't on your resume. Shockingly, as they roll the credits, it's not. You don't put that on the sleeve of your book cover. An active member in high school of the Model UN, he continued into college where he represented, the Indonesia and arguing for,
Oh,
Well, that's it.
Can I just ask, what happened to Misford? Does anybody know what happened to Misford?
No. That's
just
I would love to know. Apparently, well, you should ask. Bill Barr and John Durham apparently went around the world on the AG's jet trying to chase that down. So I heard. I think New York Times reported it, but I think they went to the Italians and got whatever the Italians had on him. But I think he dropped off the face of the earth, which is what every legitimate academic does. You're ensconced in academia, you're teaching, publish or perish, maybe you have tenure. And so when the political goings get tough and you're accused of being a conduit to Russian intelligence, you drop off the fucking grid entirely, because that's entirely legitimate. That screams, I am a professor. But and the other, as long as we're dishing up Papadopoulos, Simona, his wife, apparently is running for office in Italy on a very pro-Russia platform.
Oh,
so go figure. Italian Simona.
Italian with the Ukrainian
people are
accent.
saying that accent may or may not be Italian.
We've been talking about that accent for many years.
Well, that's what I hear.
Even Simona said that Mifsud was a spy, basically, in Volume 5 of the interview. She's like, he does not seem like academic to me. So I'm kind of happy for them. They're still together. It's very cute. LB, I did ask the Papadopoulos thing to set up your question about Mar-a-Lago, if you still have it.
Okay, so this is where I wanted to do a maybe, if you ever come back, Pete, if you survive this and you come back, maybe we'll do a little animation for you in the beginning of this. Let's ask Pete, right? Because I want to ask you.
I didn't know Chunk did my favorite. There's a little gif of me. It's like it's like activated Pete Strzok. It's like Dark Pete. It's got a little lightning bolts coming out of my eyes. And
I'm so glad you like that. You mean
yes, that's it. It's like Dark Pete.
Yes. Yeah, no.
We were prepared. We came prepared just in case.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. All right, so Mar-a-Lago. We're going to ask Pete. Maybe we'll have Chunk give you a little animated opener just for you. And then when you come
Don
back,
Jr. behind the 8-ball with there's some deep. I appreciated your.
I appreciate that you got that. I appreciate that. Okay, so speaking of spies and foreign intelligence, is a place like Mar-a-Lago maybe a little soft? Would that go on anybody's radar to go down to Mar-a-Lago and maybe get a job as housekeeping?
Yeah, it like everything else associated with Trump, it's a walking disaster. I mean, there is no right from everything I've seen in public reporting, there is no tracking whatsoever that goes on in terms of who has access or not. I mean, the litmus test for getting access to Mar-a-Lago is A, will you work for minimum wage, or B, did your membership check clear? And if so, you're good. You're in. I mean, there was reporting that in some great, I forget who did it, but I mean, somebody who dug through and said or saw that in filings with the government that Mar-a-Lago routinely hires foreign workers, temporary workers, because they can't get labor to accept minimum wage who are U.S. citizens. So just your body of kind of day in, day out labor going in there aren't necessarily, I mean, to the tune of 40, 50, 60 type employees. But setting that aside, look, back up a little bit. Every president, the highest priority of any intelligence service, whether that's Russia, China, France, India, you name it, is to get somebody in or around the president of the United States. That is the place where you want to know if you are protecting your nation overseas. You want to know what, as close as you can, the president of the United States is thinking. So every president, wherever their home is, whether it's Mar-a-Lago or Kennebunkport or Chicago or wherever it may be, is a target. And it's not, when you think of a target, this isn't some sort of ham-fisted group of people who are trying to gain access. These are foreign nations who have entire organizations of tens of thousands of people funded with hundreds of millions or more dollar equivalent to do things to get inside Mar-a-Lago, to get people close to Trump, to get to the fucking basement storage room where they're apparently 50 boxes filled with classified information sitting next to like all the chairs and tables that they wheel out when somebody has a wedding event upstairs in the ballroom. So
Yeah.
it's and and we saw, there were I think 2 Chinese nationals, not together, but who were arrested trying to get into Mar-a-Lago. One had and successfully got in or close to it with multiple cell phones, all kinds of storage devices. Yeah, this Ukrainian Russian-speaking woman who worked, I think, at some bringing earlier had worked in one of these companies that would bring in particularly Russian women who were pregnant to give birth in the United
Oh, yeah, the
States
visas.
so that their children would have American citizenship. That was a prior job leading up to her job impersonating
perfect.
a Rothschild of all
Really
things to
qualified.
get into. And, of course, in the social media is filmed with like a picture next to Trump and Lindsay. I can understand. Well, I need to be careful where I go with that
Be
comment.
careful
But anyway,
here.
I can see why Trump would be interested in having a photograph with her. Let me just leave it at that. But again, it is a wide open, Wild West, lack of control from a security and counterintelligence perspective. It's a nightmare. And I can only imagine what the FBI is trying to do to figure out, okay, these boxes, we know were there, we know what they contain, we know what the information is, but the harder part is to figure out, like, who had access? And not just the visitors, like, who's the cook? Who's the electrician that comes in when something breaks down? When a toilet clogs up because Trump has been like throwing 20 papers in it, and you have to bring in a plumber? Who's the plumber? Is it some guy who has a relationship? He's a Cuban descent, and he happens to be on the payroll of the Cuban intelligence service. I mean, just every single thing when you think about what the vulnerabilities are, it's a disaster.
The plumber is G. Gordon Liddy. I think that we know that's the.
Yeah. Well, yes. Right.
I was saying I'd forgotten about the plumber. That would be the number one. I would probably, if I was a foreign intelligence agency, I would get the plumber in there, knowing that he was flushing down.
It's all that's. I mean, it would stand to reason. You look for staff, all of the staff, right? Whatever the staff is, whether it's the permanent staff, the temporary staff, all the people, who. When they're delivering food, who delivers the food? When you're having a catered event, who's the caterer? They're bringing in the flowers. Who's the florist? I mean, there are hundreds of avenues. And again, it's not the 3 of us trying to figure out how we're going to get somebody inside Mar-a-Lago. It's somebody who can pay tens of thousands of dollars for access. It is somebody who can collect everybody's email and text messages to figure out who has a vulnerability. It is a nation state behind this effort of trying to get somebody into Mar-a-Lago. Given that this was a former president, given that he already has all these vulnerabilities, it would be shocking to me if there were not serious problems in terms of foreign access into Mar-a-Lago.
Well, let's stay on that for a second, because you did a couple of tweets that I saw that I was having. And I knew you were coming on, so I wanted to make sure to ask you about this. About, there's always something also in what he says about things, right? And it's more along the lines of how he says, why he uses that demure voice. What is all that about, right? But there's a thing where in that I can just think, and everybody globs onto that. Okay, he just thought he could declassify, and therefore it declassified, and that becomes the news item because we can laugh at it because it's ridiculous, it's absurd. But along with that, if you kept paying attention, he said, wherever you take these documents to Mar-a-Lago or wherever.
Yeah.
And that caught me as soon as I saw that, because I saw the transcript first too before hearing it. I was like, oh God, first of all, he's been taking them. He's kind of saying, I've been take it all down to Mar-a-Lago the whole time he was going down there. He was down there more than he was in DC, it seems like, for the whole presidency. And then where's this wherever? What do you mean wherever?
Yeah, and I can't. I mean, for a psychologist, he's just an extraordinary case study, because when you listen to him, he's kind of plugging along, and he's like, when you take it to Mar-a-Lago or to where. I mean, he's sort of like he's talking and he can't stop himself from talking, and the other side of his head is going, shut the fuck up, and he can't not say it, and so he starts trying to like slur it out to something
word
general,
salad.
But
yeah,
it's a weird. He again, I can't. Was it the Goldwater rule that said that for licensed psychologists, that they weren't going to do any sort of analysis of public figures who weren't their patient, because that is, that would be an inappropriate use of their medical training and, against the sort of medical oath. But for any, so we don't have the benefit of, except for a fringe group of American, psychs who decided, well, we're going to analyze them. But the fact of the matter is, like, every single nation has groups of medical professionals who observe foreign leaders and come up with these big leadership profiles of what, what they're seeing, what it means, all the weird tics, what that might mean, their vulnerabilities. And so when you listen to Trump, to your point, he, and we're chatting a little bit in the run up to the show, all of us, the three of us, two weird things leap out at me. One, when you listen to him, he almost instinctively trickles out all these little, well, I've heard, or people say, or that's just what I think. He instinctively inserts these little phrases that create both legal wiggle room for him, whether that's defamation or potential claims of defamation, where he's saying, well, I didn't say that, I heard this, or people, the joke hero, people are saying, it's not me saying it, people are saying it. So he does that. And then the other completely different but totally bizarre thing was in the recent rally he had, and I think it was J.D. Vance, where at the end they're playing the QAnon music. He slips, Stephanie, into what you're calling that almost that sing-song, monotonous.
Yeah.
We are one people with one cause. We shall not be overcome. And you got the weird QAnon music, and you got everybody in the audience with a hand reaching out and sort of swaying. And it's almost like going into this sort of like hypnotic state of like psychologically imprinting the Führer, but it's a really normal people don't do this.
They don't do that.
They don't. It's not.
They don't try to regulate an entire crowd to some wavelength of whispering horseshit. No.
Right. It's like a yogi out in Oregon. What was his name? The Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, right? Wasn't the how about that? Pull.
That's good, Pete.
Yeah.
Gonna take a drink to that.
He's the Manchurian Candidate doing the Angela Lansbury thing in the Manchurian Candidate to
How about a game of cards, right?
Yeah.
And then
pass the time by playing a little solitaire, and it's very strange. Trump is
it's like Psycho meets Manchurian Candidate.
Dumb and Dumber, right? Yeah.
Dumb and Dumber.
Directed by the Farrelly brothers.
Yeah, we just sold it. It's my mashup.
Here's a question for you. Who, if you had to pick a director to make a movie of the entire 2016 Russia election, everything, which director would you choose?
Oh, I know.
Answer. Who would you? Go first.
Adam McKay. Adam McKay, who I had on my podcast.
Same.
Absolutely, Adam McKay, who made Don't Look Up and The Big Short.
Yeah.
And those. Yeah.
Not even close.
Same.
Although I will say Ben Stiller, I am impressed with what Ben Stiller's been doing recently.
The Severance stuff was great. Yeah.
Yeah. He could get there. Yeah.
So my choice would either be the Coen brothers because of the
perfect.
On the one hand, the violent humor, but more Raising Arizona, or David Lynch, just because.
Oh.
They totally get Kyle MacLachlan as somebody, but just totally bizarro. What is all this, right? So anyway, that would be my dream director. Anyway,
we could do it like a Four Rooms thing. Each director gets its own.
Each director gets their own vignette.
Yeah. Do you like Burn After Reading, by the way, speaking of the Coen brothers? Because my wife and I are obsessed with Burn After Reading, and we watch it I've seen that movie 50 times.
I love Burn After Reading. Raising Arizona by far and away is my favorite. But okay. I love the Coen brothers. And I like, yes, I'm a huge fan of their work.
Okay. Yeah. Same. Okay.
Yeah, right on. Good taste.
Okay, I have a follow-up to the Mar-a-Lago business.
All right. Let's hear it.
Is there any reality? Because I've been, you try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And also sometimes it's fun to think, okay, if I was in the Trump war room right now, what could I come up with here? Is there any possible explanation why he would have all of these classified and top secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, and then they're not in the folders and some of them are missing?
None. And he hasn't provided any reason either. There is no legitimate reason. If I were to guess, looking inside the little hamster spinning on the wheel in his head, it's going to be probably three things, right? One, he thinks it's neato. He's the guy who's in that little semi truck going, yeah, blowing the horn, when they brought in the big semi to park in front of there. He just thinks it's cool. It's like, hey, Abe, look at this picture that I just got. I mean, he thinks it's neat and he wants to show that it's neat. I think some of it, potentially what's been reported as, French leadership information, which I assume is Macron, is stuff that he finds salacious and juicy about people he doesn't like or he wants to dish. Think about, what is it, AIM, the National Enquirer parent company who had all the catch and kill stories that they kept in the safe.
AMI, yeah.
Right, AMI, right. This is Trump's like USIC, U.S. intelligence community version of that. It's just a bunch of really neat stuff, and that, not neat, but stuff that's salacious, things that he can like poke at, people he likes, dislikes, has a grudge against. And then the last bucket, I'm betting, is probably stuff that he thinks he can use financially, whether that's to coerce a deal, persuade somebody to make a deal, something to line his pockets with. I don't think he'd be so who the hell knows? But I don't think he would sit there and say, hey, MBS, here's a leadership profile or, everything we know about the Israeli nuclear program. I'll sell it to you for, $2 billion to Jared. I would hope it wouldn't be so crude as that, but that's why I think he would keep it. None of that is legitimate, of course. And I don't think the government has it all back. I think there's stuff.
I think it's out in the wild. Yeah, I think it's out in the wild. I think we have to assume that. There's no other way to approach it, right? So exactly what's out in the wild and how damaging it is. I just look at the man. Look at how out of control, and dangerous that beast is. I'm sorry. So it's like water finds its own level. Whatever it is horrific. This is what I'm saying. And I don't know that we can operate in another way and be responsible. But
it's
I'm
so
saying
crazy.
As if Greg and I have anything to do with anything. As if anything we say here matters. I don't know.
It's so crazy that the sort of the theory, I don't even want to call it a conspiracy theory, that there's shit buried in Ivana Trump's coffin. There's a non-zero chance that's true. I mean,
but I'm saying, who the fuck puts the mother of their children on this little pauper's grave on the 19th hole? You're rolling out of it like, just had done with my round of 18. I'm getting a cheeseburger and a beer, and look, there's a little pile of dirt with them. I mean, just so classless, and all for what, allegedly a tax break, right? I saw something that if by burying her there, they were able to do something that gave the land some sort of favorable tax. It's all about the grift. It's all about the grift.
Yep.
It's all about the grift, but also you just said not too long ago, it's like you hope it's not something that crass you can't imagine. I don't know what gets any more crass than this. I'm going to take my first wife and my children's mother and stick her here and get a tax write-off, and the kids are okay with it. So these are the people. These are the people. This is the family. What are we going to do? Pete Strzok, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this?
Fine, go vote. Go vote. Get 5 people. Get 5 people. Everybody listening to this, find 5 people and get them to vote.
That's it. It'll work.
That's it.
I'm into that.
Light a candle for Biden's health too.
Yeah,
those are the 2 things. Yeah.
Now, do you want to stick around for our next segment?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. All right, we're going to move on to our next segment. It's so great having you. Thank you for.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
so great to chat with you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. We have a good time.
Okay, we have a little opening for this. Okay, we're going to play
something new.
You made the opening, right? Okay,
I did. I made it.
You forgot about it. This is the thing. Too much to remember.
Okay, yay!
Yeah, okay. A lot of you watching this know who Gal Suburban is. She's a wonderful open source researcher. She lives in Florida. She's an expert in all things Florida. She knows everything about all the stuff that's going on there better than most of the journalists covering the stories, and digs deep into the weeds. And churns this stuff out on Twitter to the point where every single thing that you have to go to her. Like you read the story, like today's the story about, oh, well, they're saying that maybe they're not going to charge Matt Gaetz. Well, maybe, I don't know. That's what this paper says. What does Gal think? Like, I care more about what she thinks than what the guy that wrote the article does. So we asked Gal Suburban to give us some notes about this whole DeSantis business. And I'm going to read in my sort of quasi-newscaster voice what she wrote, just so we have, because it's complicated. All the stuff with DeSantis and Gaetz and this airline and the migrants and Martha's Vineyard and Perla. There's a lot of names and words that are, because there's all this other stuff going on. I think it's important sometimes to just sort of step back and review what's going on. So just to give people a look at, we're going to put up the governor there on the screen. Okay. And I'm reading from her thing. Okay. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis taps firm with close ties to the congressman under investigation for child sex trafficking, Matt Gaetz, to relocate migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard in a pathetic attempt to score political points. Funds used to pay a company to lie, make promises to, and ultimately abandon asylum-seeking migrants in another state came from certain American Rescue Plan loopholes exploited by DeSantis and his state legislature. And now she quotes from the Washington Post, the funds came with few restrictions, but the U.S. government imposed virtually no rules on the interest generated on that money while it remained unspent. Again, money from the American Rescue Plan. In Florida, the opening allowed local lawmakers to approve a spending blueprint that redirected money from the interest earnings associated with its federal stimulus allotment towards DeSantis's immigration policies. So they're taking taxpayers' money, getting interest on it, and using it for this shit. Okay. 2, Vertol Systems, VERTOL Systems Company, was hired for the operation. According to available Florida records, the first payment of $615,000 was made to an aviation training company which operates out of Matt Gaetz's congressional district and that has close ties to DeSantis's immigration czar, Larry Keefe. Not long after the initial transport was complete, another payment of $950,000 was made to the same company. Larry Keefe and Matt Gaetz had represented Vertol Systems in 2 lawsuits back in 2010. This, there's an article in the Miami Herald about that. Number 3, the Miami Herald interviewed asylum seekers who described their experiences with recruiters sent by DeSantis, who promised them food, a place to live, and job opportunities. Despite a second payment being processed, the recruited asylum seekers were told abruptly that their flight to Delaware was canceled. Again, that's Miami Herald. 4, none of Vertol's planes flew the 48 migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Instead, flight records show that an Ohio-based company called Ultimate Jet Charters flew them, apparently as a subcontractor. The state's contracting websites show no payments to the company. And 5, DeSantis' former press secretary, now on his re-election campaign staff, claimed that, quote, DeSantis Air punked Dems and the media by not having the second flight. However, requests for invoices have been denied by DeSantis and no refund has been issued. So again, this person is like on Twitter, did they prank us by doing this thing? Like, it's very strange. And last but not least, while more details are still being uncovered, a sheriff in San Antonio has opened a criminal investigation into the recruitment of the asylum seekers and the fraudulent means by which they were persuaded to travel. And several of the migrants from the first flight have filed a class action lawsuit against Ron DeSantis. That sounds like a boy.
Good stuff.
PR stuff did not work well. I don't think it turned out well for this guy. Yeah.
All right. What do you think? What do you think, Pete Strzok?
I can't imagine if I am a taxpayer in Florida looking at my paycheck every 2 weeks and figuring out how much is going. Well, they don't have state income tax, do they? It's all like it's sales tax, right? But
yeah, they don't have state
and property tax. But why? The extraordinary grift for the amount of money that is going from a political stunt, but of course it's looping back to the coffers of all these donors. It's just the entire thing is so gross. It's just
so awful. Yeah.
I just it
awful. Asylum seekers. This is here legally. seeking, and we're told, here's where your job will be. Here's where what kind of, it's so sadistic. I'm stuck. I like following the money though, Greg. You know me. I like following this money.
Yeah.
So this is what, $1.5 million just for this stunt?
In interest, and the money apparently, per the Washington Post, per Gal Spurban, comes out of interest payments from the money that they got for the
COVID relief.
Yeah.
From COVID relief. So taking the interest on that to pay for the stunt, so that they can score points because we made the libs so upset, right? Why? Because, okay, bring us the asylum seekers. We will take them. Welcome. Thank you. But I mean, how horrible for these, the whole thing. I can't even get started on this. You know how I go crazy on this one.
Yeah.
It's
a terrible thing.
And the dehumanization.
How can you not? I mean, it just speaks to, at the end of the day, the inability to look at somebody and see them as a person with value, and just seeing another and valuing that for the humanity of everything we interact with, and to reduce that to some sort of chattel that I'm going to stick them on a plane, I'm going to lure them in, I'm going to take them from here and put them over there and get all the cameras rolling. It just is such it just cuts through all the bullshit to like show the utter lack of just decency. I mean, there is no, how can you approach another person that way? I can't, and to do that at scale, and to do that for the purpose of, promoting yourself and getting yourself reelected, and all the people who are watching that saying, yeah, you really stuck it to them. Yeah, you get it. You're my guy. You're my guy, and I'm going to vote for you because you did that shit. Well, it's so, I don't, it's just depresses me, because it speaks not to just one person. It's a person who's doing that because they know it's going to play to their base, to their constituents. It's going to motivate their vote.
Yeah. I mean, we have to hope that the publicity from this falls out nationally and kills his presidential ambition. And that's what I'm hoping happens, because I have no faith in the voters of Florida. They elected the guy that did the Medicare fraud payment, but he's one of the senators. DeSantis is the governor, and the other senator, Rubio, is a storage issue Rubio who tried to Bill Barr the Volume 5. I mean, I don't know who he's working for these days. But
and all these guys, Marco has his little Bible study tweets every morning, and Cruz, all these people are appealing to people who believe that they are very religious, very Christian, and this is if you are Christian, I can't think much more antithetical to the teachings of Christ than this sort of behavior. I mean, it just is so gross, and I don't know. It depresses me, and I don't, because of what it speaks to such a large segment of our national population and what appeals to them. And I don't know how you easily fix that. And we're making it worse, not better. But I'm sorry, I'm dragging everything down. I'm going to go back to drinking my drink.
You're right though, because
we have to plead the fifth before you take a drink. That's the rule on the show.
Yeah, it's the little inside joke. You're right though, and it's one thing I've learned over the last, it's like 6 years of this shit now that we've been on this, LB. It's just the country's more racist, more misogynist, more homophobic, all of that stuff than I thought. It just is, and it's sad and it's depressing. But the only thing that we can do about it is keep calling it out when we see it, and that's one of the reasons why we come on this show, and it's one of the reasons why it's important that you're doing what you're doing, and try to get everybody, hold the people that do the bad things to account. I think that's important. So
and I got to say this. I want to say this. Someone said this to me about you, Pete, and so I want to share it with you. There was a choice. You had a choice where most people, I think, would have just sort of backed off, and you leaned forward. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that you did that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You
all right. We got to go to our last segment, you guys.
We have announcements.
What's the announcement, Craig?
I don't know. I have this XX behind me, and it's not because it's like porn. It's because this is the 20th show, and I happen to have these in my office. So I'm like, I'm going to bring them. I got to remember to bring them for the 20th show, because by the 21st show, they will no longer be valid. Anyway, that's why they're there. If anyone's noticed.
Get you and I.
I have a cool podcast today. I've got Kimberly K. Hogg, who wrote a great book called Spiderweb Capitalism. One of these weeks we'll have her here. She was great. And just about how all these uber wealthy people, like how they're connected and how they evade paying taxes. And, you know, it's very well written, well done. Her approach to it's pretty fascinating. So taking a listen to that. And again, please, if you're listening to the show, if you're watching it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know, let's say it like we're 8. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like, whatever they say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, all right. Last segment.
Let me get
last segment. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. We have to give a shout out to what's happening in Iran right now, where there seems to be this movement sparked by an event where women are taking off their scarves and protesting, and people are out in the streets protesting the oppressive rule of this religious theocracy there. Long overdue. Iran has long been a place where they make such good movies, and it's such an old, robust culture. Like sometimes the countries where this sort of movements happen, where it feels like they're going to have a revolution and create democracy and more voices for more people, they happen in countries that are new or don't have this established history. Iran is the fucking Persian Empire. That place has been there for longer than anybody. You know, I've gone on my show plenty and talked about how Ukraine is older than Russia. Persia's been there longer than anything. And that Iran is the remnants of the great Persian Empire. This is a long history, thousands and thousands of years old, and they deserve better than being ruled by these theocratic weirdos. And we might, and this is speaking to the hopefulness of this now. Now, I know there's a long way to go here, but we've got Putin on the rocks in Russia. And our friend Asia Radin, friend of the show, asked, and I think this is a very good question, I wonder if all of this sudden emergence of protest in Iran is because Russia is on the rocks and these Ayatollah is relying more on Russian power than anybody realized, okay, which I think is a very good question.
Maybe.
Whether it is true or not, Putin's definitely on the outs over there. The Ayatollah is on wobbly ground in Iran. We've got Trump on the ropes here. Are we going to get to a place where all three of these people are going to fall in the same little time period where the queen dies? It's crazy amount of history in a very short period of time if something like that were to happen. Just like 50 years from now, people will read about it and be like, holy shit, what the hell was in the water that year? You know? And I don't know. It's Mercury retrograde's over now. Maybe we're just going to start seeing the dominoes fall. I don't know. What do you think, Pete?
No, I think the lesson out of all this for me is like women will save us. Whether it's Iran, I mean, we've spent like God knows John Bolton and everybody going back to Ahmed Chalabi and everybody trying to like in effect regime change in Iran. But if you want to, you do the one thing that is going to get half of the population united in fury against what you're doing. And what we're on the 7th night now of protests in Iran. I think that if you look at that and if you can translate that and hopefully if the Democrats are able to harness some of the anger about what the extraordinarily extreme things that the Supreme Court are doing with reproductive rights, take all this energy, take all this outrage and get it together and unify it in a way that can make positive political change. I mean, we're seeing it in Iran. I hope and expect we see it in the midterms, but you know, as a kind of privileged white male, for all the kind of huffing and puffing that, you know, the white male populations tend to do, it ain't nothing compared to when you get a motivated, unified group of women who decided they're going to do something. And, you know, I am hopeful that it does lead to something in Iran. Finally, I would, you know, well, we'll see, but that's what I think. It is inspirational. I look at the the scenes that are coming out of Iran and across the nation, just extraordinary acts of courage and people who are just standing up for what is right and appropriate, and it's inspirational, and I'm hoping it continues.
Yeah, I think I do think the internet was cut. So hopefully some stuff will get routed around that so we can get that going back there. You were the one who said to me before the show, Pete, that this hasn't even been covered in the New York Times. Is that seems unfathomable to me?
Yeah, I looked at they had a couple articles on like page A7, and it's like at some point it's like, hey, how about maybe it is time for a little bit of front page coverage. We're on a week of protests where people are staring down the security apparatus of the Iranian state and winning. Maybe let's put that on the front page somewhere. Maybe even above the fold. It just seems that it would be something, right? It would seem something notable and noteworthy to sort of get that message out.
I think so. And let's see what happens, because there's a lot of journalists over there. I don't know what's happening to them. We don't know what's happening to, we do know that a lot of protesters have been rounded up as what happens. So let's just see. Maybe, guys, maybe we're going to have a very fruitful fall. Yeah. Fruitful autumn. Be great.
It would be nice. It would be nice.
Be really great.
And really, the fact that this is even a possibility did not, a month ago, it didn't feel that way at all. So the fact that this is even in the realm of the possible, I think, is something to be celebrated. And again, our support to the people protesting in Iran, in Russia, and and here in this country, with to these fascists that are trying to take over the state houses and take women's rights away. Vote. That's what we got to do. We got to vote. All right.
Yeah. Some comments.
We're doing good. I think. Do you have any closing thoughts, LB?
Well, I had something I wanted to. I forgot I had an Ask Pete. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we have to get an Ask Pete. Yeah.
Okay. So I had another Ask Pete. So this is why I need my little things that I do. So just because of the attorney, okay, lawyer, the logic. I want to talk a little bit, 2 seconds, and maybe we'll come back another time and flesh this out a little bit. But it occurs that no one's really explored the logic of Trump insisting he's still president, and he has attorneys that are actually now calling him the president in court, in current court, like this past week, still calling him the president. So this whole thing about Trump being the president, and this guy, he'll play a card, and then you go a little bit further and it kind of falls apart. So this is like 2 cards in, right? I just want to take a little bit further. If he's still the president, then how can he run for a 3rd term?
Because his second term was stolen.
I know, because, but no. So then, but if you're saying, no, I can run for the 3rd term, then aren't you admitting that you're not still the president, that you didn't win that election? I think it's worth challenging this logic train a little bit. Like, go ahead and give it to him. We're going to give it to you, Trump. You're still the president. You won the election. Okay, so your time is almost up.
Yeah.
We have to suffer a couple more years of you. That's it. You can't run again. And so all these people that you're taking money from, if he starts doing that, how can the PACs give money for a 3rd term? This doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know at what point the Republican establishment looks at the amount of money that Trump is raising and bringing in for himself that is not going to any down ballot races. I mean, I'm talking like senators and congressmen, let alone lower level. There is so much grift that is skimming off at him, not to any of the former Republican establishment. I don't know how long they sit there as business people and allow that to happen. But there's a very interesting Orrin Kerr, who's a law professor, has this idea. Put out the idea of Trump being illegal. Sort of like somebody being amoral, but he doesn't have a sense of legality. The idea that his motivation and his behavior is not guided by what is legal or illegal. He doesn't. It isn't a frame of reference that he engages in behavior-wise, and that was always a part of the trouble. When we were looking at him in the early days, the special counsel while I was still there, trying to establish that he knew something was wrong, that he knew, and especially all the Uday and Qusay, the Eric and Don Jr. about what they
haven't heard that in a while.
They didn't have any idea that what they were doing was. And so, if part of what you're trying to do, establishing a violation of law, is that you had an intent, you had a knowledge that it was wrong. Right. They're also such a bunch of dummies that you couldn't necessarily prove it. But who knows what he thinks? There's some reporting that he just wasn't going to leave the White House, right? I'm just going to stay.
Yeah. What are you going to do?
How do you?
It is the kid on the schoolyard that when the teacher says, this is going to go in a report, it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to arrest me? There's always that third grader, that fifth grader that figures that out. And the teacher just stops, right? Or the yard monitor is like, oh my God, wait a minute. This kid's got me. And all the other kids are like, they either love him or they're like, oh, we hate that kid. Oh, he's going to come fucking beat me up and take my lunch money. But, so he's that. He just never evolved. He's also a little bit, I got to say, I do study the mob bosses. This idea of the grift off the top instead of the money going down. You know what we call that in New York and Chicago and Vegas? That's a tribute. So he's just taking his tribute. He's just taking it. He knows how to do that.
Of course he is. He's done it. He's done it since his entire career. Yes, real estate, casinos, sports boxing promotion. It's all tied in with organized crime. It's all a con. It's all sitting there saying, and it's everything Michael Cohen said. Don't write what you can say. Don't say what you can just kind of give a nod about. It's all baked into that, which again, if you're trying to build a criminal case, makes that really, really hard if your subject's behaving that way.
That's why we have the T-men. Just to bring that plane all the way back around.
Well, that's also the beauty of him stealing the classified documents. Like it's like, to your point, Pete, it's hard to prove that he did the insurrection, even though we all know he did. You stole the stuff and you have it at Mar-a-Lago. You can say it doesn't matter if it's declassified with your mind or not, because you stole it. Whether it's declassified is irrelevant. You're not allowed to have it. And that's a cut and dry kind of thing that I think is easier for people to understand, easier to argue in the court of law. So I don't know. Maybe this will be the thing that I'm so jaded now that I just feel like we're going to be.
The classified is going to be so hard with his, I declassified it or not. I would lean. Don't think of this as mishandling a classified information featuring obstruction. Think of this as criminal obstruction featuring classified. The fact, all the stuff that went on after he was subpoenaed for information, after Christina Bob, signed her little mealy mouth certification that it was all turned over. The obstruction is going to be this. I think the linchpin featuring classified information, not the other way around. Just because there's going to be, it's going to be messy to find usable in a prosecution context, finding classified information that can be used in a criminal prosecution, that he doesn't have the ability to persuade one juror that there's reasonable doubt that he thought he declassified it. Because again, that's the standard, right? You got to have a unanimous jury that proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And finding that with the classified, I would look more to the obstruction. But we'll see. There's so much. How can there not be between New York, between Georgia, between January 6th, between the classified information? I mean, for fuck's sake, why? And Stephanie, I know you were pitching the IRS, and I hope you're right, but you read the New York stuff, it goes back to 2011. What in the hell has the Internal Revenue Service been doing for 11 years, along with the FBI, along with DOJ? This isn't a secret that he's doing shady shit.
No, but he doesn't have any
evaluations of his real estate. If it's going on at a state level, it's going on at a federal level. So where are the feds?
Here's the difference. He was dumb enough to become president. People are finally figuring this out. I've been saying this since 2016, 2017. I was like, what is he doing becoming president? There is no one going to be above him for him to hand over to get out and slip out of his legal jeopardy. It's gone for him. And if he was thinking these classified documents were going to somehow be a get out of jail free card for him, if they started to come after him, he could say, well, I'll give you this back. He's got another thing coming there too. I don't think that's going to work. So the problem is that he became president to begin with. The problem is his first term is just becoming that in the first place. There's no one above you to rat out.
Well, Putin.
Not for long. We'll see.
All right. What a great show.
This was great. Pete, thanks so much for coming. This was so much fun. it was fun to listen to. It was fun. I like when I don't have to talk that much. It means that I'm very engaged and everything. So thank you so much for joining us and for staying for the whole time. We learned a lot. It was a lot of fun, and I know all the people watching enjoyed it. What is your Twitter? There it is. It's just at Pete Strzok. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah. All right, guys.
We're glad to know that you're doing okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for watching. Once again, great comments, everybody. Please subscribe. Wait, do we do it like in the Trump voice?
No.
Subscribe.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Subscribe.
Yeah, I think you should hit the subscribe button, everybody.
Oh, everybody raise their hand.
No. Bye.